September 1943, 14:27 hours, Haarlem, Netherlands. A Nazi checkpoint guard watches a girl with braids pedal toward him and waves her through without checking her basket. Inside it, a loaded handgun. That mistake would cost the Third Reich more than he could imagine. The afternoon light slants low through the cobblestone streets of occupied Haarlem, casting long shadows across Wehrmacht checkpoints that choke every major intersection. Soldiers in field gray uniforms stand with Mauser Kar 98K rifles slung over their shoulders, eyes scanning every face, every bag, every movement. Their orders are clear. Stop anyone suspicious. Search anyone who looks nervous. Arrest anyone carrying contraband. A young girl approaches on a rusty bicycle, maybe 12 years old by the look of her. Dark hair woven into two long braids that swing gently with each rotation of the pedals. A wicker basket mounted on the handlebars, covered with a simple cloth. She wears the kind of plain dress you'd see on any Dutch schoolgirl running errands for her mother. The soldiers glance at her. One nods. Another waves her through. They don't check the basket. That's the mistake. Beneath that cloth, nestled among what might appear to be groceries or books, lies a 9mm handgun. And the girl with the braids, her name is Freddie Overstegen, knows exactly how to use it. She's 14 years old. She's already a trained killer. And she's arguably the most daring member of one of the war's most legendary trios of female resistance fighters. But the soldiers see a child. They see innocence. They see harmlessness. They have no idea they just let a weapon slip through their fingers. September 6th, 1925. Schoten, North Holland. Freddie Mender Overstegen enters the world on a working-class canal barge that rocks gently with the current of Dutch waterways. Her father, Jacob, doesn't make much money. The family struggles constantly. There's never enough food, never enough warmth in winter, never enough of anything except principles. Her older sister, Truus, was born 2 years earlier in 1923. The two girls share everything: a cramped cabin, straw mattresses, hand-me-down clothes, and eventually the most intense experiences human beings can endure. Her mother, Trenton Vanderkoop, called Trien by those who know her, is a woman of iron conviction. Communist, social justice warrior before the term existed, member of International Red Aid, a social service organization connected to the Communist International. These aren't just beliefs she writes about, they're principles she lives by, even when they cost her everything. Even in the depths of poverty, the Overstegen family takes in refugees. People fleeing persecution in Lithuania hide in the hold of their barge. Young Freddie learns early, when someone needs help, you help. Risk be damned. The marriage between Jacob and Trien doesn't last long. He's romantic, impractical, unable to pay for the barge. Trien gets fed up, but the divorce isn't bitter. When they leave, Jacob stands on the bow and sings them a farewell song in French. Romantic, sad, utterly useless. Freddie doesn't see her father much after that. Trien moves her daughters to Haarlem proper, into a cramped apartment where the sisters share a bunk bed with straw mattresses. Money is always tight. But Trien works hard, and more importantly, she teaches. She teaches them about justice and injustice, about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, about the importance of fighting fascism. She enrolls them in the Dutch Youth Federation, a communist youth organization. The girls spend time making dolls for children caught up in the Spanish Civil War, learning that their actions, however small, can help people suffering far away. Trien remarries and has a son, Robbie. The family remains poor, but they have each other, and they have their principles. Those principles are about to be tested in ways no one can imagine. Late 1930s, Germany. Ominous news bleeds across the border. Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party has seized control. Jewish people are being stripped of their rights, driven from their homes, beaten in the streets. Some flee west, seeking safety in the Netherlands, hoping the Dutch will remain neutral as they did in the First World War. Trien doesn't hesitate. She opens her home to Jewish refugees from Germany and Amsterdam. A Jewish couple lives with the family for a time. Through them, young Freddie begins to understand what's really happening under Nazi rule. The stories are horrifying. Systematic cruelty, dehumanization, growing danger. 1939, war erupts. Germany invades Poland. The Overstegen household becomes a center of quiet resistance even before the Netherlands is invaded. They print illegal anti-Nazi magazines right in their living room. The printing press is so loud, they post lookouts to warn them if anyone's coming. Freddie and Truus sneak out at night and daub resistance slogans on walls. They write, "Don't go to Germany. For every Dutch man working in Germany, a German man will go to the front." They paste their messages over German propaganda posters calling for Dutch workers. It's dangerous work. If they're caught, the consequences will be severe. But the girls are fast, clever, and at their age, authorities are less likely to suspect them. Then the nightmare arrives at their doorstep. May 10th, 1940, 0400 hours. Germany launches Fell Gelb, Case Yellow, a massive coordinated invasion of the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. Luftwaffe bombers scream across Dutch airspace. Fallschirmjäger paratroopers drop on strategic targets. Panzer divisions roll across the border. The Dutch fight back with everything they have, but they're overwhelmed. Outdated equipment, inadequate fortifications, a military doctrine built for neutrality, not for total war. May 14th, 1940, 13:22 hours. Rotterdam. Heinkel 111 bombers of Kampfgeschwader 54 appear over Rotterdam city center. Dutch forces are still fighting. Surrender negotiations are underway, but the bombers have already been dispatched and the recall order doesn't reach them in time. 97 tons of bombs fall on the city center. Fires erupt. The firestorm spreads. Nearly 800 civilians die. 85,000 people are left homeless. An entire city center is erased in minutes. It's a terror bombing designed to break Dutch will. It works. May 15th, 1940. The Dutch Royal Army surrenders. Queen Wilhelmina flees to London to form a government in exile. The Netherlands is occupied. The nightmare has begun. The Overstegen family immediately burns all their radical literature. They have to protect the refugees still hiding with them. But the danger has multiplied exponentially. Being caught harboring Jews under Nazi occupation means death for everyone involved. The refugees have to be moved. It's a heartbreaking process. These are people the family has come to know, to care about. Many of them are later discovered in their new hiding places. They're all deported. They're all murdered. Decades later, when Freddie talks about this, she's still moved to tears. "We never heard from them again," she says. "It still moves me dreadfully whenever I talk about it." But Freddie and Truus can't just sit by and do nothing. They continue distributing illegal anti-Nazi newspapers and pamphlets. They keep posting warning messages over German propaganda. They're only 14 and 16 years old, but they're committed to resistance. And their activities are about to attract some very important attention. 1941. Haarlem. His name is Frans van der Wiel, and he's the commander of the Haarlem Council of Resistance. He's heard about two young sisters who were fearlessly spreading anti-Nazi materials around the city. He decides to pay them a visit. One afternoon, he knocks on the Overstegen door. He's quite formal, takes off his hat, shakes hands with both girls. To Truus's embarrassment, he sits down in the lumpiest chair in their modest living room. Then Trine excuses herself and leaves the girls alone with their guest. Franz gets straight to the point. He's putting together a resistance group. Not just people distributing pamphlets. He needs fighters. People willing to commit acts of sabotage, people willing to use weapons. The tasks he has in mind are subversive, violent, and extremely dangerous. He's asking two teenage girls if they're willing to risk their lives fighting Nazis. And he wants their mother's permission to recruit them. Freddie and Truus look at each other. This is it. This is the moment when resistance goes from being about posters and pamphlets to being about life and death. Truus asks the question they're both thinking. Will they have to kill people? Franz doesn't sugarcoat it. Yes. But he emphasizes that targets will be carefully chosen. Gestapo officers, traitors, people actively hunting down Jews and resistance members and having them killed. Not just any German soldier. Real fascists, real criminals. The girls go to their mother for guidance. Trine's response stays with them for the rest of their lives. She gives them permission to join, but she gives them one rule, one principle they must carry with them no matter what they do. Always stay human. Always remember your humanity. Never let the violence turn you into the monsters you're fighting. Hold on to your conscience. Hold on to your compassion. Never lose sight of why you're doing this. It's an impossible ask in some ways. How do you kill people and stay human? How do you watch people die by your hand and maintain your compassion? But it's the challenge Trine sets before her daughters. And they accept it. Freddie is 14 years old. Truus is 16. They officially join the Council of Resistance. At first, Franz doesn't tell them everything they'll be doing. He starts them off with what seems like straightforward sabotage work, blowing up bridges and railway lines to disrupt German military operations. We'd like to do that, Truus recalls years later. Then Franz says they'll need to learn to shoot Nazis. Freddie's response, according to her sister, is perfectly matter-of-fact. Well, that's something I've never done before. The training begins. They're taken to an underground potato shed where they learn to handle firearms. They learn to shoot. They learn to throw grenades. They learn to plant explosives. They practice until they're proficient. The resistance can't afford mistakes. When you're a teenager going up against the Nazi war machine, you don't get second chances. You either do it right or you die. So Freddie and Truus practice. They learn. They prepare themselves for what's coming. Their first major operation isn't an assassination. It's arson. The target, a Nazi-occupied warehouse. The method, clever and disturbing in its simplicity. Freddie and Truus dress up, put on makeup, make themselves look pretty. Then they approach the SS guards at the warehouse and flirt with them. The guards, seeing two young, attractive girls paying attention to them, are completely distracted. While the guards are preoccupied, resistance members set the warehouse on fire. It burns. The mission is a success. 2 warehouses, actually. Both destroyed. And the sisters learned something important. Their youth and their femininity are weapons. The Germans don't see them as threats. That makes them incredibly dangerous. But burning warehouses is one thing. What comes next is something else entirely. What comes next haunts Freddie for the rest of her life. Her first kill. The moment when she stops being a girl distributing pamphlets and becomes a killer. She's the first of the 3 famous female fighters to actually shoot someone. The first to cross that line that can never be uncrossed. The details of that first kill aren't entirely clear. What we know is this. Freddie shoots a Nazi soldier while riding her bicycle. It might have been a planned assassination. It might have been an opportunistic attack. It might have been a drive-by style operation with Truus pedaling and Freddie shooting from the back. What we know for certain is that Freddie pulls the trigger. She watches a man fall, and something inside her breaks in that moment, even as she knows it's necessary. Years later, when Freddie talks about killing, she always comes back to the same thing. Not the feel of the trigger or the kick of the gun, but what happened after.
Yes, I've shot a gun myself, and I've seen them fall, she says. And what is inside us at such a moment? You want to help them get up. That instinct never leaves her. Every time she kills someone, her immediate impulse is to run to them and help them, to undo what she's just done. It's her humanity asserting itself in the midst of horror. It's the thing her mother asked her to hold on to, and it tortures her. But she keeps doing it because it has to be done. Because these are people who are hunting and killing innocent civilians. Because the alternative is to do nothing and watch the darkness spread. Freddie and Truus both justify it to themselves this way. They're killing collaborators who have betrayed their neighbors. They're killing foreign invaders who have no right to be in their country. They're soldiers. And soldiers do what must be done. When people ask them how many they've killed, they always give the same answer. You never ask a soldier how many people they've shot. The tactics evolve. The honey trap becomes one of their signature methods. Here's how it works. Freddie or Truus, dressed nicely, wearing makeup, enters a tavern or bar where German officers are drinking. They make eye contact, smile, start a conversation, flirt. The officer, flattered by the attention of a pretty young woman, relaxes. Eventually, one of the girls makes a suggestion. Want to go for a stroll in the woods? The officer, thinking he's about to have a romantic encounter, eagerly agrees. They walk into the forest together. And then, in a secluded spot, one of two things happens. Either the girl pulls out a gun and shoots him herself, or a male resistance fighter appears, as if by coincidence, and does the killing while the girl makes her escape. Sometimes they stage an argument. The male fighter says something like, "Girl, you know you're not supposed to be here." They apologize, turn around, and walk away. As soon as they're out of sight, gunfire. The officer falls. By the time his body is discovered, the resistance fighters are long gone. It's cold-blooded, calculated. Murder, if you want to call it that, though the resistance calls it liquidation. Freddie later describes feeling a kind of dissociation during these operations. You have to shut off part of yourself to do it. You can't think about the fact that this man might have a family, might have children waiting for him to come home, might be somebody's son or brother or husband. You have to think of him as a symbol, as the enemy, as someone who's part of a machine that's murdering millions. Otherwise, you can't pull the trigger. But afterwards, in the quiet moments, in the dark of night, the humanity comes flooding back. The sisters both struggle. They cry about it. They have nightmares. We did not feel it suited us. It never suits anybody unless they are real criminals. One loses everything. It poisons the beautiful things in life. But they keep doing it, again and again. They become some of the most effective assassins in the Dutch resistance. And then, in 1943, the trio becomes complete. 1943, Haarlem. A young woman named Hannie Schaft, called Hannie by her friends, joins the resistance cell. Hannie is different from the Overstegen sisters in some ways. She comes from a more educated background. She's been studying law at the University of Amsterdam, dreaming of becoming a human rights lawyer. She has close Jewish friends. When the Nazis order all students to sign a loyalty oath to Germany, Hannie refuses. She quits university rather than compromise her principles. She wants to fight back. She wants to use weapons, and she finds her way to Franz Vanderbilt and the Council of Resistance. Hannie has one very distinctive feature: bright red hair. It will later make her famous. The Nazis, not knowing her identity but having seen her at several attack sites, put her on their most wanted list as the girl with the red hair. Eventually, Hannie dyes her hair black and wears glasses to disguise herself. But that red hair becomes iconic. Even Adolf Hitler himself reportedly orders her capture. The three women work together beautifully. They have complementary skills and personalities. Hannie is the intellectual. She speaks fluent German, which makes her valuable for infiltration. She's thoughtful and strategic. Truus is the leader, decisive, pragmatic, down to earth. She makes the tough calls and keeps everyone focused. And Freddie is the planner. She maps out their missions in advance, thinks through the details, anticipates problems. She's also the most feminine and fierce, a combination that makes her exceptionally effective at honey trap operations. Together, they become a standalone unit within the larger resistance cell. They trust each other completely. Their lives are literally in each other's hands every single day. They're the only women in a 7-person cell, and they prove that women can do everything men can do in combat operations, and sometimes do it better, because no one suspects them. Before we go on, tell me where in the world you're watching from. USA, Canada, Germany, UK, Europe. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you want more forgotten chapters of history, feel free to like the video and subscribe. Their work goes beyond assassination. Sabotage is a regular duty. They use dynamite to blow up bridges, cutting off German supply routes. They destroy sections of railroad track between Zandvoort, IJmuiden, and Haarlem, disrupting troop movements and military logistics. These aren't small symbolic gestures. These are real tactical operations that materially impact German military capabilities in the region. They also work as messengers and couriers, transporting weapons and illegal documents hidden in their bicycle baskets. Freddie pedals through the streets of Haarlem with firearms concealed under a cloth, right past German checkpoints. The soldiers see a young girl with braids on a bicycle and wave her through. They never imagine that this child is carrying guns to resistance fighters or transporting forged identity papers that will save Jewish lives. Speaking of saving Jewish lives, this is perhaps the most important work they do.
The three women help smuggle Jewish children to safety. The operation is brilliantly simple. Freddie or Truus walks hand in hand with a Jewish child through the streets, acting like an older sister taking a younger sibling on an errand. To any observer, they look like a normal family scene. Who would question two sisters out for a walk? The girls escort these children to safe houses or to contacts who can get them out of the country entirely. They save dozens of children this way, maybe more. The exact number isn't known because so much resistance work went unrecorded for security reasons. But the work isn't without its terrifying moments. Sometimes they're caught in air raids while transporting children. Some of those children die in the bombings. Imagine the trauma of that. You're trying to save a child's life, and despite your best efforts, they're killed by bombs while in your care. The guilt would be crushing. But the women keep doing it, because for every child they lose, there are others they save, and every saved life matters. They work in the emergency hospital in Eid on the German border in eastern Holland. This gives them cover for their activities and also allows them to gather intelligence on German military movements. They can observe a German military airport and report back to the resistance about troop strengths and activity patterns. They distribute illegal newspapers and anti-Nazi posters throughout the region. Every day brings new risks, new close calls, new chances to be caught. The psychological toll is immense. They witness horrors that no one should ever have to see, let alone teenagers. German and Dutch SS troops randomly seize innocent people off the streets. Men, women, children line them up against walls and shoot them, force their families to watch. Freddie and Truus see this happen. They're forced to witness it, helpless to intervene. The rage and disgust they feel in those moments, the sheer hatred for what the Nazis represent, fuels them, but it also scars them deeply. Truus once witnesses something that pushes her beyond her breaking point. She sees a Dutch SS soldier snatch a baby from its father's arms and smash the infant against a wall, killing it instantly. The father and the baby's older sister have to watch. They're hysterical. Without a second thought, without waiting for orders, without considering the consequences, Truus walks up to that SS soldier and shoots him dead right there. It isn't a planned liquidation. It isn't an assignment. It's pure human reaction to inhuman cruelty. She shoots him because someone has to, because letting him walk away after murdering a baby is unthinkable. These are the kinds of experiences that fill their days and nights. They live in constant danger. The Germans are offering enormous rewards for the capture of resistance fighters. By the end of the war, 50,000 guilders is being offered for the capture of the Overstegen sisters. That's a fortune. Anyone who betrays them will be set for life. Yet somehow they survive. They're careful. They're smart. They change their appearances. They trust almost no one. And they keep fighting. But the darkness is always there. The nightmares, the intrusive thoughts, the way violence becomes normalized when you live with it every day. They both suffer from what we would now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder. At night, they scream in their sleep, fight invisible enemies, wake up in cold sweats. The trauma is accumulating. Truus will later spend time in a mental institution. Freddie will experience periods where she can't get out of bed for days at a time. But during the war, there's no time for processing trauma. You just keep going. You do what has to be done, and you hope you survive long enough to deal with the psychological damage later. The three women, Freddie, Truus, and Hannie, grow incredibly close. They're more than friends. They're sisters in arms. They understand each other in ways no one else can. They've seen things together that bind them forever. They've saved each other's lives multiple times. They've watched each other kill. They've cried together. They've laughed together in the brief moments when laughter is possible. They're a family forged in blood and fire. And then they lose one of their own. March 21st, 1945, 1600 hours, Haarlem. Hannie Schaft is stopped at a military checkpoint. She's carrying illegal communist newspapers and a pistol concealed on her bicycle. It should have been a routine stop. She's passed through countless checkpoints before. But this time something goes wrong. Maybe the guard is more thorough than usual. Maybe someone tipped them off. Maybe it's just bad luck. Whatever the reason, they search her. They find the gun and the papers. Hannie is arrested. She's taken to prison in Amsterdam. The Gestapo knows they have someone important. They just don't know who. They interrogate her. They torture her. They keep her in solitary confinement. Hannie has dyed her black hair back to her natural red by this point, but they still don't make the connection that she's the girl with the red hair that they've been hunting for so long. Not at first. Then, tragically, a woman named Anna Weinhoff identifies her by her red roots. Anna has been captured and is being used by the Nazis to identify resistance members. Whether she intended to betray Hannie or was coerced, we don't know. But once Hannie is identified, her fate is sealed. The resistance tries desperately to rescue her. Truus disguises herself as a German nurse and goes to the prison with a fabricated story about needing to take Hannie for a medical examination. She cries, she pleads, she's convincing. But it turns out Hannie has already been moved. The rescue attempt fails. Hannie's parents are arrested and sent to Herzenbusch concentration camp near Dunbosch, also known as Camp Vught. This is a deliberate strategy to break Hannie psychologically, to force her to give up information about her fellow resistance fighters. The distress of knowing her parents are suffering because of her, combined with grief over the recent death of another resistance friend, temporarily breaks her spirit. Her parents are eventually released after 9 months of imprisonment. But Hannie never gets the chance to see them free. By then, The war is in its final weeks. The Nazis are losing. Liberation is coming. But they still have time for one more murder. April 17th, 1945. 09:30 hours. The dunes outside Overveen. Two Nazi officials, a Dutchman named Martin Cooper and a German named Christoph Kleine-Schmitz, are her executioners. According to later testimony, they shoot her at close range. The first bullet, fired by Kleine-Schmitz, doesn't kill her. It grazes her, causing terrible pain. What happens next becomes legend, though the details remain disputed by historians. According to the story that spread through the Dutch resistance and later entered popular culture, Hannie, even in her final moments, showed defiance, reportedly telling her executioners, "I shoot better than you." Then, Cooper takes out a submachine gun and fires a burst of bullets. One of them hits her in the head. Hannie Schaft, 24 years old, dies in those dunes. Her body is buried right there in a mass grave with hundreds of other resistance fighters. She isn't discovered until after liberation. 422 bodies of resistance members are eventually found in those dunes. 421 of them are men, and one girl with red hair. November 27th, 1945. Hannie is given a state funeral. Queen Wilhelmina herself attends. She calls Hannie the symbol of the resistance. Hannie is reburied with full honors at the Dutch Honorary Cemetery in Bloemendaal, where she rests to this day. The location of her final moments is now marked by a memorial, one of several throughout the dunes commemorating where the Nazis executed resistance fighters. For Freddie and Truus, losing Hannie is devastating. They'd been through so much together. They'd relied on each other completely. And now Hannie is gone, murdered just weeks before liberation. The guilt is crushing. The sense of loss is unbearable. They've survived, but their friend, the girl with the red hair who fought so bravely beside them, hasn't. That survivor's guilt will haunt them for the rest of their lives. May 5th, 1945. The Netherlands is finally liberated. German forces in the country officially surrender. The nightmare is over. Freddie is 19 years old. Truus is 21. They've spent their entire adolescence at war. They've killed more people than they can count. They've saved lives. They've witnessed horrors. They've lost friends. And now, suddenly, it's over. What do you do with that? How do you go back to normal life after experiencing what they've experienced? The answer is, you don't. Not really. You can't. The war has changed them permanently. Freddie later says that the war doesn't really end for her until she dies. That might sound like hyperbole, but it's the truth of trauma. You carry it with you forever. In the immediate aftermath, Freddie spends a few months healing at Het Loo Palace. Queen Wilhelmina has opened the palace to veterans and resistance fighters for recovery. It's a gesture of gratitude, a recognition of what these people have sacrificed. But a few months in a palace can't undo years of psychological damage. After that, Freddie goes to work for the Political Investigations Service. This is the agency responsible for tracking down and arresting Nazi collaborators. It seems like a natural continuation of her resistance work. She's good at it. She arrests collaborators all over the country. But she starts noticing something disturbing. The wealthy collaborators, the high-ranking ones, the ones with connections, they aren't being arrested. Only poor people face consequences. When she reports this discrepancy, she's told to ignore it. Freddie resigns immediately. She can't stomach the hypocrisy. After everything she's done, everything she's sacrificed, to see justice applied selectively based on class, it's too much. She marries an engineer named Jan Dekker. They have 3 children together. By all outward appearances, Freddie settles into a normal, quiet domestic life. She focuses on being a wife and mother. When people ask her later how she coped with the trauma of the war, her answer is simple: by getting married and having babies, creating life after being surrounded by death, building a family after losing so much. It's her way of moving forward, of trying to be normal, of trying to forget. But you can't forget. The memories don't fade. Every year on May 4th, which is Remembrance Day in the Netherlands, Freddie wakes up filled with dread. The anniversary of liberation should be a day of celebration, but for her, it's a day when all the ghosts come back. She struggles with insomnia her entire life. Depression hits her in waves. Sometimes she can't function. Her son, Remy, will later say that he believed the war never truly ended for his mother. She was fighting it in her head every day for the rest of her life. And there's another source of pain, one that has nothing to do with combat or killing. In the decades after the war, Freddie lives in the shadow of others. Hannie Schaft becomes a national icon. Schools are named after her. Streets. There are books. A movie in 1981 called The Girl with the Red Hair. Hannie's story is taught to school children across the Netherlands. She's the symbol of female resistance. Truus also gains recognition. She marries a fellow resistance fighter named Piet Menger in November 1945. She becomes an artist, a sculptor and painter whose work is heavily influenced by the war. She writes a memoir called Not Then, Not Now, Not Ever, published in 1982, about her resistance experiences. She speaks publicly, gives lectures at universities and secondary schools about war, anti-Semitism, tolerance, and indifference. She's honored as Righteous Among the Nations by Yad Vashem in 1967. She receives the Order of Orange Nassau in 1998 on her 73rd birthday. She founds the National Hannie Schaft Foundation to preserve her friend's memory. She's a public figure, respected and honored. And Freddie? Freddie lives quietly, raises her children, serves on the board of the foundation her sister created, supporting Hannie's legacy. But she feels sidelined, overlooked. She admits later that she's jealous of Truus. She says in an interview, "I have always been a little jealous of her because she got so much attention after the war. But then I just think, I was in the resistance as well."
Part of the problem is political. Freddie and Truus are communists. Their mother raised them that way. They'd been members of communist youth organizations. They distributed communist newspapers during the war. And in the post-war period, with the Cold War beginning and anti-Soviet sentiment running high, the Dutch government doesn't want to give too much credit to communists. Even communists who fought the Nazis. Even communists who saved lives and risked everything. When other resistance fighters are awarded pensions for their service, Freddie and Truus are initially refused. The government is staunchly anti-Soviet. Orders come down, possibly from Queen Wilhelmina and Prince Bernhard themselves, to minimize recognition of left-wing resistance members. It isn't until well into the 1960s, more than 20 years after the war ended, that the sisters finally received their resistance pensions. There's no back pay for those 2 decades. This is the bitter reality Freddie lives with. She's been arguably the most daring of the 3 famous female fighters. She's been the first to kill. She's pulled off some of the most dangerous operations. She's smuggled children, transported weapons, planted bombs, executed traitors. She's done everything asked of her and more. And for most of her life, almost nobody knows about it. Almost nobody cares. Because she's a woman. Because she's a communist. Because the world prefers its heroes to be men. Preferably men who fit comfortable narratives. Women don't count, Freddie says. They still don't. That hasn't changed. But in the final years of her life, something does change. 2014, Haarlem. Freddie is 88 years old. Truus is 90. They finally receive proper recognition from their government. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte personally awards them the Mobilization War Cross. This is a significant Dutch military honor, and it's usually awarded by mayors. For the Prime Minister himself to present it demonstrates how important the government now recognizes their service to be. According to Freddie's son Remy, that ceremony is a highlight of his mother's life. After decades of feeling invisible, of living in shadow, she's finally being honored publicly for what she'd done. Streets in Haarlem are named after both sisters, not just after Hannie, but after Freddie and Truus too. Their names become part of the city's geography, ensuring future generations will remember them. 2016. A Dutch documentary titled Two Sisters in the Resistance tells their story to a new audience. Freddie appears in it, speaking about her experiences more openly than she had before. The documentary brings renewed attention to the sisters' contributions. International media begins covering their story. They're finally getting the recognition they deserve, even if it comes so late in life. But time is running short. June 2016, Truus dies at the age of 92. For Freddie, losing her sister is like losing a part of herself. They've been through everything together, from their childhood on the barge to the war years to the long decades of post-war life. They've understood each other in ways no one else could. According to Truus's daughter, one word was enough for them to understand each other. They've relied on each other completely during the war. Their lives were in each other's hands. That bond never broke. And now, Truus is gone. Freddie has suffered several heart attacks in her later years. Her health is declining. She spends her final years in a nursing home in Truus, about 5 miles from Haarlem. September 5, 2018, one day before her 93rd birthday, Freddie Overstegen dies. The last surviving member of the legendary trio is gone. The obituaries that follow her death tell her story to the world. The Washington Post runs a lengthy piece that draws huge reaction. Major international news outlets cover her passing. People around the world learn about the girl with the braids who killed Nazis from her bicycle, the teenager who seduced German officers and led them to their deaths in the woods, the young woman who walked hand in hand with Jewish children to safety, the resistance fighter who planted bombs and smuggled weapons and executed traitors. She's done everything asked of her and more. And for most of her life, almost nobody knows about it. Almost nobody cares. Because she's a woman? Because she's a communist. Because the world prefers its heroes to be men. Preferably men who fit comfortable narratives. Women don't count, Freddie says. They still don't. That hasn't changed. Looking back at Freddie Overstegen's life, several things become clear. First, the sheer courage it took to do what she did. 14 years old when she joined the resistance. Still just a child, really. Most 14-year-olds today are worried about school and friends and maybe sports or hobbies. Freddie was learning to kill human beings. She was transporting weapons past Nazi checkpoints. She was helping children escape genocide. The weight of that responsibility on such young shoulders is almost incomprehensible. Second, the psychological cost. Freddie paid for her courage with her mental health. The nightmares, the depression, the insomnia, the inability to escape the war even decades after it ended. This is the reality of war that we often gloss over in stories of heroism. Heroes pay a price. The trauma doesn't end when the fighting stops. In some ways, that's when it really begins, because suddenly you have time to process what you've been through. Suddenly, you have to figure out how to live with what you've done and what you've seen. Third, the injustice of her erasure. For most of her life, Freddie's story went untold. She lived quietly,
privately while others were celebrated. And it wasn't because she'd done less. If anything, she'd been more daring than most. But she was a woman. She was a communist. She didn't fit the narrative that post-war society wanted to tell about itself. So she was ignored. And that's wrong. It's a betrayal of everything she fought for. Fourth, the importance of her mother's lesson. Always stay human. Freddie Overstegen gave her daughters permission to fight, but with that one crucial condition: don't become monsters. Don't let the violence strip away your humanity. And incredibly, impossibly, Freddie managed it. Even after all the killing, even after all the death, she maintained her conscience. That instinct to help the people she'd shot, to want to pick them up even as they fell, that was her humanity asserting itself. It cost her tremendously. It added to her trauma. But she never lost it. She remained human. She did what her mother asked. Finally, her story matters because it's a reminder that resistance takes many forms, that courage isn't always loud and public, that some of the bravest people who ever lived spent most of their lives unknown, that women have always been warriors, even when history tried to erase them, that the fight against fascism required ordinary people to do extraordinary things, and that we owe those people, especially the women, our memory, our recognition, our gratitude. Freddie Overstegen didn't want to be a hero. She didn't want to kill anyone. She wanted to live a normal life. But when her country was invaded and her neighbors were being murdered, she made a choice. She chose to fight. And she fought with everything she had, with her youth, with her innocence, with her appearance, with her courage. She fought until liberation came, and then she spent the rest of her long life trying to reconcile what she'd done with who she wanted to be. She was right about one thing: women still don't count, not the way they should. Women's contributions to history, especially military history, are still minimized, still ignored. Women's stories are still treated as footnotes to the real history made by men. That needs to change, and the way we change it is by telling stories like Freddie's, by insisting that her life mattered, that her courage mattered, that what she did and what it cost her deserves to be remembered. September 5th, 2018. One day before what would have been her 93rd birthday. The girl who rode her bicycle through occupied Haarlem with a gun in her basket. The teenager who seduced Nazis and led them into the woods to their deaths. The young woman who walked hand in hand with Jewish children to safety. The resistance fighter who planted bombs and smuggled weapons and executed traitors. The soldier who never told anyone how many she killed. The survivor who spent her whole life haunted by what she'd seen. If the story stayed with you, tell me what part hit you the hardest. I read every comment, and if you want more forgotten history brought back to life, feel free to like and subscribe.